Welcome to another edition of Howling with the Wolf. I'm Cameron Wolfe. We're doing a little bit different location today on my balcony. Beautiful day out here in Miami. So I wanted to chill out here and talk to you guys on another Howling with the Wolf session. So there's a lot of things I want to discuss today, but first things first, I want to kind of discuss this Kendrick Norton feature that I put out this week. I put out a story on ESPN. If you haven't checked it out, please go check it out. Video and a story on Kendrick Norton Jr., the Dolphins defensive lineman, who got his arm severed in a car accident, on July 4th, and essentially is restarting his new life. So I want to give you guys a little bit of detail behind the scenes story. If you've seen it, I'll give you details that weren't in the piece. If you haven't seen it, I'll give you little tidbits to hopefully make you go back and watch it. Second, I want to talk about Josh Rosen. He had his first start of the season. Can we get a true evaluation of Josh Rosen? He has 13 games left in this season to prove to Dolphins GM Chris Greer, Brian Flores, and all the people who make decisions out here in Miami, please don't draft Tua. That's what his main focus is for the rest of the year. So I want to talk a little bit about whether we can get a true evaluation of Josh Rosen. And then finally, I want to give you guys a little bit of a tidbit inside the locker room. It's a segment I've started over the last, 2 weeks. And I want to continue that. So I'll give you that towards the end of the segment. So as always, you guys can go ahead and flow on questions and ask, whatever comes to your mind, NFL related, Dolphins related, everything you guys want to ask, and I'll do my best to answer it. This is kind of an informal segment, a chance for me to be real with you guys, and a chance for me to get to know you guys a little better as well. So feel free to interrupt me at any time, and we'll talk whatever you guys want to talk. So thank you guys for joining once again, and let's get to the action. First things first, this Kendrick Norton story, I want to give you guys a little background. This is a Dolphins player. If you hadn't heard a lot about his story, this is a Dolphins player who got in a car accident on July 4th, and he thought he was going to die, and that's pretty much the core of it. He thought he was going to die. He lost half of the blood in his body. He felt like when the ambulance was coming, he told me that he felt like he just wanted to go to sleep. And just hearing his story, hearing his girlfriend explain the story, gave me a lot of perspective. Gave I think a lot of the players on the Dolphins and people in the Dolphins perspective of how precious life is and how things can change on a dime so quickly. So I think that was my biggest takeaway from this story, and I thought that it was really awesome for him and his girlfriend to allow me and my crew into their homes to tell this story. And if you guys haven't seen it, it's a really powerful emotion that he's kind of having throughout this story, discussing how his arm got literally chopped off while he was in this accident, how his girlfriend told him, "Where's your arm?" in the middle of this, and he looked down and said, "Stop playing." He tried to do a push-up, and when he tried to do a push-up, he fell over on that side of his arm. Just all of these details that I learned throughout this story just opened my eyes and just kind of realized, man, when I complain about having to go to work at 7 a.m. or when I, stub my toe on the table and I complain, what does that even mean, like relative to a guy who lost his arm? So I thought that was really one of the more important and more powerful stories that I've ever worked on, just from the impact that it had on me. And I hope that the people who got a chance to watch it got something out of it as well. A couple of things that I do want to share that I haven't, that I didn't put a lot of in the story is that, Kendrick has been getting a lot of emails and letters from amputees. And he showed me, a letter and a social media video from a kid who essentially lost his arm. He's an amputee and was trying to work out. And he got inspiration by seeing Kendrick posting workout videos on his IG. And he wanted to meet Kendrick. So they're trying to set up a meet with him and this kid so that they can essentially work out together, that he can create this interaction, and that he can continue to be sort of a pillar and a mentor in this kid's life. And I just thought that, I told him this that day we were filming, and I wrote this in the story. I just feel like he's going to make a bigger impact as, his post-NFL career than he may have ever made on the field. I know he's probably sad that his NFL career ended just like that. He was going into his second year. He's 22 years old. But just to see his positive spirit and see him essentially being okay with this new normal and saying that, hey, this is God's plan for me, I think that was really powerful. It taught me a lesson, and I hope that it taught, us a lesson. The second thing is that, there were a lot of people on the scene, and this is the point that I hope that you guys got out of the story, that literally helped to save his life. There was a couple that he kept talking about, him and his girlfriend Kira, that took off their clothes, that took off their shirt, their pants, and tied his arm in a tourniquet. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but a tourniquet stops the bleeding whenever your blood is coming out. So Kira talked about how the blood was gushing out, and they were able to tie a tourniquet around his arm to essentially stop the bleeding, or he may have died right there on the scene before the ambulance got out there. So he said he's still trying to find those two people who essentially saved his life, and that's what he said. So I just thought that was just remarkable. It showed just kind of the grace of humanity, that people on the side of the road who were driving, minding their own business on that morning, stopped and essentially saved this man's life, and they didn't know him from me and you. So that was another thing that I really kind of got out of this story. And the final thing, and then I'll kind of open it up for questions or move on to the next topic if you guys have heard enough of me jabbering. But just kind of hearing from the Dolphins' perspective, like Kendrick Norton still has a locker inside the Dolphins locker room. He still works out in the team gym. He's been at practices on a semi-regular basis for the Hurricanes and the Dolphins. I mentioned this in the written story, but Brian Flores, the Dolphins coach, was on vacation on a Maryland farm with his friends and family, and he got the call with Kendrick Norton, and he feared for the worst. So he rushed down there, and he went to the hospital to see him almost every day. He still is a Dolphin even after his NFL career is over. And the Dolphins are taking care of his salary this year. The NFL and the Dolphins are paying for his insurance. And I think it's just a kind of a testament of how the NFL is a brotherhood, and that's just not words. Devon Gottschall told me he's going to dedicate his season to him. Isaiah Ford played high school football with Norton and with the Dolphins, and he talked about how he got sick that night. Overnight, he told me he got sick, really, really sick, and he couldn't figure out where it came from. And he now thinks that's a premonition for when Kendrick got in that accident. So all of these little details that I kind of learned through the story really opened my eyes. So I just kind of wanted to share those details with you guys. If you guys have any questions about the story and how it came about, feel free to fly those on throughout the story, throughout this chat, I'm sorry. And, I think after that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some Josh Rosen and some football. Just two more Bears, this powerful story, prayers to Kendrick. Thank you guys. If you guys have any notes to have for Kendrick, go ahead and fire him away. I have a regular conversation with him, so I can send him anything you guys want to tell to him. Miami Alondro, we're going to talk about Josh Rosen. I'm going to go ahead and jump to your question. He says, Cam, it seems getting Tua is inevitable. What was the point of trading for Rosen? Very good question, and this is something that even when the Josh Rosen trade was happening, sorry to segue a little bit hard to football, but right when the Josh Rosen trade happened, my question was, what's the best case scenario for Josh Rosen? You look at Josh Rosen, and he's a guy who was a 2018 top 11 pick, a guy who people think still has a lot of potential, can really be a really good player in this league. And there's still people who think that he has a ceiling that hasn't been touched. But for this organization, they have been stuck in quarterback purgatory for 2 decades. So the way I saw it is it looked like the Dolphins were taking a flyer on a guy who had the traits and the high potential to potentially be their guy. And they felt like they saw him this offseason. They felt like they saw him in practices. They felt like they saw him in preseason. And their honest evaluation was Ryan Fitzpatrick's the better guy for us to start. So I think that was a really eye-opening thing for Josh Rosen, because I'm sure he thought he was going to win that job. But it also told me, and I think it told a lot of us, they're drafting Tua, or they're drafting the quarterback in this first round. And I think that, it's unfair a bit for Josh Rosen. I always compare it to poker. I've said this on a couple radio shows, but Josh Rosen's been dealt a bad hand, a 7-10 offsuit hand, and he's got to play it 2 years in a row. Arizona traded him away after they drafted Kyler Murray. The Dolphins brought him in, even though they seemed really set on a 2020 first-round pick. But, you know, Josh Rosen has 13 games left, and we saw a little bit last week against Dallas. He's trying to be aggressive. He's trying to throw the ball downfield. He's trying to show that, hey, you don't have to draft a quarterback. But I think the one thing that he'll have to do to separate himself is it won't be wins. It won't necessarily be points, but it'll be what command does he have over the offense. It's going to be the eye test. When you and I watch this play, does he look like a franchise quarterback? And so far, I haven't seen enough to say, hey, he's going to be a franchise quarterback. But I do think that he has 13 more games to try. And I talked on ESPN.com today about his aggression. He loves Preston Williams. That's his best buddy on the team. And he loves to chuck it up to him. And that's something that can make the Dolphins offense from a snoozer, which has been for the first 3 weeks, to maybe having a little bit of life to where, you know, maybe you get to the third quarter without falling asleep. So I think that, you know, that's what we can look forward to for Josh Rosen. I don't think, you know, honestly, I don't think there's anything outside of, you know, looking like a top 10 quarterback that Josh Rosen can do to change their mind. I think they've decided, and I think they're willing to sacrifice that second-round pick as a flyer. And I think their hope is, best case scenario, Josh Rosen plays really well, and they draft Tua, they let them compete, and Tua or whoever else they draft becomes their guy, and they can trade Josh Rosen for, you know, more picks down the road. And that sucked for Josh Rosen that he's going to have to probably start over for his third team. But hopefully that third time will be the charm in that case. So I hope that answers your question about Josh Rosen. I'm seeing Dan Ahart. He's giving some love to Kendrick. Appreciate you that from Calgary. I'll send him a note on that. Misery Inn, thank you. Appreciate y'all for watching. Miami Alondra, I'll get to your next question, and then I'll give a couple of my thoughts on Rosen, and then we'll move on. But Miami Alondra is saying, after this massive teardown, would it be a major failure if the Dolphins don't land the number 1 pick? Yes, absolutely. They're going all in on this thing. Tank or die. You know, ride the tank. Tank commander. Chris Greer's in the front of the tank, driving us all through. They're all in on this first-round pick, first overall pick. We talked to Chris Greer after the Minka Fitzpatrick trade about a week or two ago, and he joked, we can do whatever we want with all these picks, and I think that's their goal. They want to have the number 1 overall pick and as many picks as they want so they can get whoever they want. If that's Tua, if that's Justin Herbert, if that's drafting an offensive lineman, if that's drafting an edge rusher, they want to do whatever they want, and they have the capital to do it. So I think it would be a huge failure. ESPN's FPI, which we use to formulate projections, has the Dolphins with a 72% chance to get the number 1 overall pick. That's an incredible number 4 weeks into the season, three weeks into the season. 72% chance to get the number 1 overall pick. And I think it's even higher than that. I just don't see how they win more than 1 or 2 games overall. So I just think that they're a lot for the number 1 overall pick. That's just my thoughts. Trey, what's up, man? Trey the Jedi is asking, what are your thoughts about that video with the Dolphins receivers dropping all them passes? I guess my thoughts are, you got to catch the ball. They got to be on the jug machine. You know, Jakeem Grant, the dude they just gave a big check, has been disappointing, to be frank, so far in this season. I think he would even admit it. He's supposed to be their deep threat. He dropped a touchdown from Rosen earlier this week. I think they dropped 6 or 7 balls last week. We were joking in the media room today, what's the over-under on drops for the Dolphins this week in the game? And, you know, somebody said 4, and, you know, I'm not sure I would go under. I might go over for 4 because they just haven't shown the ability to catch the ball. And, you know, I think a lot of it is probably talent. You know, they don't have a ton of talent in that receiver corps, but drops for concentration. And, you know, Josh Rosen's already in a bad situation. He hasn't helped himself with timing and accuracy. He's had a lot of mistakes in those areas, but drops definitely don't help. And, you know, Preston Williams had a touchdown last week that I think the defender made a good play on, but he probably should have caught that. Devontae Parker made a play, had a play last week where on a slant pass where he could have walked into the end zone, and he dropped that. So, like, come on, man. You got to help a dude out. And they have, you know, I'll say this one thing about the receivers. They're equal opportunity droppers. They dropped the ball for Ryan Fitzpatrick. They dropped the ball for Josh Rosen. They don't care. So they're not discriminating against one quarterback or the other. Danny Hart says, you seem higher on Rosen than nearly every other Miami beat writer. What do you think is the most underrated aspect of Rosen's game? I didn't know I was higher than everybody. Honestly, I'm not super high on Rosen. I do think he deserves a chance, and that's really what I've been preaching. I haven't seen a lot in this game during training camp and preseason and even games so far to make me think, hey, he's going to be a franchise quarterback one day. But there are traits there. I think the biggest thing for me is that he has some mobility and some pocket presence to be able to get out of some chaos. And this team has a lot of offensive chaos because of their offensive line. He doesn't seem like rattled about that. He does have a propensity to throw that deep ball, and sometimes they can be extremely accurate. And you can see that arm talent. He clearly has NFL starting quarterback arm talent. And that's something that you can't teach. Ryan Fitzpatrick doesn't have NFL starting quarterback arm talent, but he has NFL starting quarterback intangibles, and that's why he's stuck so long. Josh Rosen has NFL starting quarterback arm talent, but he doesn't yet have NFL starting quarterback intangibles. So the question becomes, can he catch up in that element? I don't know. I know he's trying, but that's the question that I want to know. It's not about how many passes he can complete or all those other stuff. Can he identify the Mike linebacker consistently? Can he get his timing and anticipation correctly so that when a receiver comes over the middle, like Allen Hurns did against the Dallas game, he doesn't get them sent off, doing a concussion test. Those are things that I want to know about Josh Rosen, and we'll see those over the next 13 games. So I hope that answers your question, Dan. I think a couple thoughts I want to have about Josh Rosen, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about a locker room tidbit. I think that I'll answer your question in 1 second, Dan. The thing with Josh Rosen that I really want to see is he completed less than 50% of his passes last week. That's not good enough to be a starting quarterback. He talked about being the spark, getting the ball out of his hand quicker, and being aggressive. So I'm going to judge him on those three areas. The Dolphins have said time and time again they don't want to be judged with kitty gloves. They don't want to be judged with moral victories because of their talent. So I'm going to judge him straight up. This week he plays the Los Angeles Chargers, his second game, his first game at home. So I'm going to judge him at 1, in the first quarter, does he come out with that spark and does he come out with that aggression? Number 2, his offensive line is not good, and he knows that. So is the clock in his head on time? And does he throw the ball out with anticipation and timing? That's the second team. And 3, aggression. He's talked about meeting an aggression goal that the Dolphins have every week. Is he aggressive? Does he hit Preston Williams or Devontae Parker or Jakeem Grant with a deep ball in the first 15 plays of the game? I need to see that. So those are the 3 things I'm looking for Josh Rosen. So Dan has a question, one more question, saying what's 3 things to watch for Sunday? I think 3 things. 1, Josh Rosen. I just talked a little bit about him, but I'm going to give you 3 other ones because I talked about Josh Rosen a lot. 1 thing I want to see is how Xavier Howard bounces back. Keenan Allen has been the best receiver in the NFL this season, and he's going against that Dolphins defense. They're banged up. Bobby McCain came back to practice today, but we're not sure if he's going to play. Jamal Wilkes hasn't practiced Wednesday or Thursday. It's not looking great for him, and he's their slot cornerback. Keenan Allen feasts in the slot. He had 183 yards last week against the Houston Texans. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 200. How does Xavier Howard bounce back? Last week, Amari Cooper was eating his lunch, and I think Xavier Howard would even tell you that. And there was times when I watched the film where you could see Xavier Howard looked a little bit discouraged, and his body language and his energy didn't seem to be normal Xavier Howard. So how does he bounce back? I need to see that bounce back energy. As Big Crit says, I need that energy. That's what I need from you, Xavier Howard. I need that energy this week. I know it's not, this team is 0-3. There's not a lot of optimism, but you got paid to be top cornerback in the NFL. I need to see that out of you. So I'm looking for that, number 1, for Xavier Howard. Number 2, Kenyon Drake in this running game. That's the one part of this offense that we can potentially see erupt. This Dolphins offensive line is not going to get better throughout the season. They're only going to get worse because they're going to lose parts as they go on. So I need playmakers, Kenyon Drake and Kalen Balazs, to make plays outside of the scheme. Kenyon Drake got the most touches of the season last year, and he showed a little bit of promise, but then he coughed the ball away in the end zone and cost them a touchdown. So Kenyon Drake and Kalen Ballage, I want to see how they respond, and can either of them make a big play and solidify themselves as the man in the backfield. That's number 2. And number 3, I'm challenging those receivers. We talked about Preston Williams. We talked about Devontae Parker. Trey asked me a question earlier about the drops. Y'all had 6 or 7 drops this week. People laughing at y'all. People making videos about all the drops. They saying y'all got drop-itis. They say y'all need to be on a jug machine. How do y'all respond? Y'all are NFL receivers, prideful guys. I need to see some great grabs. I need to see consistency. Let's have 1 or no drops this week for the Dolphins receivers. So that's the 3rd thing that I'm looking for. So those are 3 things that I'm looking for the Dolphins this week. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys my tidbit for the week in the locker room, and I'm going to go ahead and let you guys watch some Sunday night football, Thursday night football. Days mixed up. Motorcycles out here today. Locker tidbit. I want to take you guys inside the locker room. One thing that I think people don't always understand about NFL players is they're just like me and you when they're not on the field. And what I mean by that is earlier this week, I was in the locker room actually talking to some of the DBs. And on the other side of the locker room, the DBs are on one side, and across the way is defensive linemen. And they kind of congregate in their corner. So the Dolphins just signed Taco Charlton from Dallas. Robert Nkemdiche is on the PUP list. They signed him from Arizona, both former first-round picks. And then Devon Godchaux, who's one of their starting defensive tackles. They're all huddling up, and they're having a conversation. It keeps getting louder and louder and louder. And I'm like, what is going on? So I walk over there, and guess what they're arguing about? College teams, dog. They're arguing about who got the better college team. Devon Godchaux went to LSU, Taco Charlton went to Michigan, and Robert Nkemdiche went to Ole Miss. And Devon Godchaux is a big LSU guy. He's talking about how LSU could smack Michigan, and they're going back and forth. And then Nkemdiche comes in and starts laughing. Godchaux points him out, said, "What you laughing about? Ole Miss ain't been doing nothing in forever." And they just have this sort of fun dispute for about 5 minutes about college teams. And I think one thing that people don't realize about NFL players, they're not just in this box. They realize everything that's going on in the world. In fact, I've had players, multiple players, who've made bets on college games. I'm not sure if they can bet in college games in the NFL, so I'm not going to draw snitch on anybody. But let's just say 2 players will bet $50 or $100 on a game, college football game this week, and trying to see who wins. And they watch games every week. They watch what goes on across the NFL. They're always on social media. So I think that was kind of a tidbit that I don't know if a lot of people outside the locker rooms realize, but they have barbershop conversations just like you and I. So yeah, that's my locker room tidbit of the week. I'm going to answer this last question from Miami Alondro because we didn't talk about Tua a lot this week, and I'm going to get this Tua question in, and we'll bounce. So Miami Alondro says, "I don't think I've ever heard you talk about this. What are your thoughts about Tua?" Okay, so I'll say this. They mess with me in the Dolphins media room because everybody loves Tua. Like, everybody's like got the Tank for Tua shirts on. They're like, Tua, I'll name my second child Tua, whatever. All this different Tua talk. And I like Tua. I think he's going to be a really good player. But I don't think he's God. And I don't think he's a savior who you draft Tua and he fixes everything. So I think that he's really skilled. I think that he plays in a scheme that really works with his skill set. And he has really talented players and, 2 receivers who are probably going in the top 10 next year. He has probably 2 or 3 offensive linemen who are going to be drafted. And he's playing on a team that has probably half of that defense is going to be in the NFL. So he's always playing up. So my big question for Tua is, what does he look like when he gets out of that scheme? We've seen him been banged up a little bit. He's a little bit injury prone. He's a smaller quarterback. So I think there are questions. So my biggest hesitation is when everybody anoints him. That being said, he's my quarterback 1. I really like Tua. I think that he's the guy you draft number 1 overall. He has pristine accuracy, and that's something that we haven't had out here in Miami for a long time. I think that he has the moxie. We saw that in the national championship game as a freshman when he came off the bench and threw that 4th-quarter touchdown pass. He has it. And my biggest thing for a quarterback is you have to be a playmaker outside of the scheme. And I've seen him make plays even when plays are broken. So I love Tua. He's my QB1, and I hope the Dolphins get him. But don't think that when the Dolphins get Tua, if and when they get Tua, that he fixes everything. There's a lot of holes on this team, so they need to fix them all. that's it for me this week on Howling with the Wolf. We're going to come back next week, and hopefully we can talk some good noise and have some fun. Thanks as always for joining me, and follow and tell your friends to come join me next week.